The next front organization of the Illuminati, which we shall examine, is called the Bilderbergers. Now I know most people by now must have heard something about the Bilderbergers one way or the other. Now I'm not going to belabor a point here. I have been trying to make simply 3 points just to prove everything I've been speaking about. First point I've been wanting everyone to understand is that there are 6 front organizations of the Illuminati and that they are interconnected. The second point I've been trying to make is that through these interconnections, the Illuminati is able to start affecting everything on a global level, which coincidentally, or maybe it's not coincident, is very well prophesied in the Holy Scriptures, and that the telltale mark of all these front organizations are that they are all interested in 3 major things: economy, politics, and religions. And these are the 3 things that give the Illuminati their incredible power. With the Royal Institute of International Affairs, we know that when we examine their material, those are the 3 big things that they are interested in. 50% of all their talks and discussions revolve around those 3 things. When the Council on Foreign Relations was created, when we look at their material, the same thing is obvious, and among other things, they are always and have been identified as the sister organization of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So the interlocking and interconnections are apparent with them. When the United Nations had finally been created and their charter signed, we sent 47 Americans who were all in the Council on Foreign Relations to represent America at the United Nations. So the interconnection is very obvious in that one, and when we look at their preamble, we find out that those 3 things are what they are obviously interested in, aside from, going out and butchering innocent people. Now, let's see how the Bilderbergs tie into all this. Now, it was on November 22nd, 1910, that Senator Nelson Aldrich would have a secret meeting, and this would be in the area known as Hoboken, New Jersey, and again this was on November 22nd, 1910. Senator Nelson Aldrich had invited members to meet with him at a secret location, simply identified back then as Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island was basically just a hunting club. There wasn't anything prominent other than the fact that it was a hunting club on an island. Now the interesting thing about this particular club, and you can see it's identified right here off the shore. The one thing of interest to take note of right here is where it is located off the coast in Georgia, is that Jekyll Island Hunting Club was owned by J.P. Morgan. Again, that name seems to be cropping up everywhere as one of the head figures in the Order of the Illuminati. Now, Senator Nelson Aldrich had invited 7 people to Jekyll Island for a special meeting. Those people would be A. Pyatt Andrew, who at the time was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. The next person was Senator Nelson Aldrich, who was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Henry P. Davison, who was a senior partner of J.P. Morgan and Company, would also be invited to the special meeting which would take place on Jekyll Island. Charles D. Norton, who was the president of Morgan's First National Bank in New York, was among those 7 people who was asked to attend this very special and very exclusive meeting. Benjamin Strong, who was president of Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, was also in attendance at this Jekyll Island meeting. Another person who was invited was Frank Vanderlip, who was the president of Kuhn Loeb's National City Bank of New York. And last but not least, a name that I'm sure every historian is familiar with, was Paul Warburg. Paul Warburg, among other things, was partner of the banking conglomerate of Kuhn Loeb and Company, but he was also identified as the main figure in the cartoon comic strip known as Little Orphan Annie. He was the one to whom Daddy Warbucks was created. Paul Warburg, at the time, was considered to be one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest man on the earth. Now, these 7 men were American leaders in oil companies, banks, in communication, transportation, in industry, and they were all, in their own individual rights, multi-millionaires. Now, the meeting on Jekyll Island, which was on November 22nd, 1910, which was a Tuesday, the meeting basically consisted of 3 major points. How do they create a central bank for America? How do they bypass President William Howard Taft, who was known to have said, and to paraphrase it again, you put any document like that in front of me, I'll veto it on the spot. And then, how do they keep the truth, the true nature of the central bank from Americans? Now, this was not going to be an easy feat. But one of the most immediate things that they had to do was get rid of President Taft. President Taft, as far as those people at Jekyll Island, had to go one way or the other. Now, interesting enough, if you remember, I have shown you, as we have discussed on previous DVDs on the series, Illuminati cards that deal with not just the prophecies, but the political intrigues that's going on even to this very day, and that was including, among other things, those events that happened at Y2K and 9/11. And of course, there had to be an Illuminati card on the Federal Reserve. Something that important just could not be left out. And it was through, I should say, the Federal Reserve Act that the Illuminati finally gained control over the United States of America. Now, getting rid of Taft wouldn't be that difficult. All they had to do was make sure he wouldn't be reelected as president. Not as easy as you would think, but eventually they were able to make sure that instead of President Taft being elected, President Wilson would be. And if you remember, it was through President Wilson that they were going to get the League of Nations to swallow up America after World War I, and they would put Wilson in as the first global dictator, as predicted in Philip II Administrator, as written by Colonel Edward Mandell House. Now, it was taking the entire combined might and power and financial power of J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller, who was backing Wilson, to guarantee that he would end up as the president. It was only 7 years later, after the first Bilderberg meeting, that the Federal Reserve Act became a reality. And from that day on, America would slowly be destroyed. Now, the creation of the Bilderbergers is a very interesting one. You see, among other things, over here is Joseph Rettinger. Joseph Rettinger, among other names, he was known as His Gray Eminence. He had a very colorful military background in espionage himself, and what is very interesting to note about him is that he was considered to be a left-wing idealist. He wanted to create a super organization that literally had unlimited power. Now, in order to do this, and as it says, he had a lot of political influence and some of the highest friends you can imagine. One of Joseph Rettinger's closest friends and allies was Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. He was the royal consort to Queen Juliana. Now on the right side is the royal consort, Prince Philip, to Queen Elizabeth II of England. Now, it was Joseph Rettinger who proposed to Prince Bernhard his idea of creating this super organization that literally had unlimited power. Once he convinced Prince Bernhard of the merits and values behind such a super organization, he got Prince Bernhard to propose these ideas to President Truman. Eventually, once all the information and ideas had come together to create this super organization, they needed to meet regularly with other individuals of political power, of financial influence, and so on and so forth throughout the world. They're going to have regular meetings so that they could keep up with this and continuously perpetuate these ideas to create that super organization until it became a reality. It was at this place, this famous hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, in the Netherlands, that on May 29th through the 31st in 1954, that the very first meeting of the Bilderbergers were held. Now, it became known as the Bilderberger groups because this happens to be the Bilderberg Hotel. Hence, they were called Bilderbergers from then on in. Now, there are no cameras or any unauthorized personnel allowed at any of these meetings. No photos are allowed. However, here is a photo of Prince Bernhard right here at the very first meeting of the Bilderbergs. He was elected as the secretary of the Bilderbergers. This was back in 1954, and I should say he was the first chairman, but he would hold that position all the way through 1976, 20 years later, until the Lockheed scandal, in which it was unveiled that he had been taking millions of dollars of bribes to influence certain companies in his country, you know, to select who they would favor with treaties and such and different agreements. But this is Queen Juliana of the Netherlands along with Prince Bernhard. Now, the interesting thing about the Bilderberg meetings is that they claim that they are not a policy-making body. They state that there is no final conclusions made at any of their meetings and that no formal resolutions are passed. None. But the fact of the matter is they are making policies for countries around the world. Definite conclusions are being made. Instructions and orders obviously are given to them through their masters in the Illuminati, and problem solving definitely is being carried out because these people, remember, are based on creating a super organization that would literally run the earth. Queen Juliana, at the time, was considered the wealthiest lady on the earth. She has an estimated fortune of $3 billion. Now that's hard, cold cash in the bank. With Queen Elizabeth II, her cash flow, if we would just say cash now, is a little bit around $500 million, but that's not counting all her jewelry, her jewelry collection, I should say, her art collections, her coin collections, all the castles and everything else she owns. I mean, as far as I understand, her last estimate, and this is just as I would say, a guesstimate, because no one could bring it down to the pennies with her, is the last one was stated to be a little bit over $28 billion. So yeah, she's worth quite a bit of money. Now, at this meeting, there was approximately 115 to 120 people in attendance eventually as the years go by. These people, would meet on a regular basis. They would be presidents, prime ministers, members of nobility and royalty, scholars, CEOs, dignitaries, and other public officials. They would be meeting at the Bilderberg meetings, and they would be definitely making certain policies, so on and so forth. Now, it was Senator Jacob Javits who also met at the Bilderbergers. Well, I should say he himself knew about the Bilderberg meetings, and he was reporting different things about, their activities and such. Now, these people who are supposed to be, who are not supposed to be making policies or anything like that, have been doing an interesting job. Because here at the St. Simon Islands, which is in Brunswick, Georgia, from February 15th through the 17th in 1957, this is where the Federal Reserve Act, if you remember, which was created on Jekyll Island, this is just right next door to it. Among other things, at this particular meeting, there was 99 people in attendance, and the one thing that conclusively connect the Bilderbergers to the other organizations is that 61 of the people who were in attendance in 1957, they were all from the Council on Foreign Relations. Again, here we have a direct connection, and a lot of the people who are in attendance of these meetings are repeat people. In other words, they meet there again and again and again, and one of those easily identified people who is constantly in attendance would be the Rockefellers themselves. Over here, this would be the Buxton. No, this would be the Palace Hotel in Buxton, England, and it was on May 13th to the 15th in 1958 that 24 of the members who had been at the St. Simon Island meeting in 1957, the year before, they'd be meeting here again. And of them, many of them also, again, in attendance, were directly from the Council on Foreign Relations. The meeting that was held at St. Castin in Canada back in April 21st through the 23rd in 1961, this would be the 7th Bilderberg meetings. Interesting enough, the policies that they discussed this time was how the Western nations could be better coordinated, the role of NATO, nuclear and non-nuclear deterrence, and the change of economic strength of the United States in Western Europe. But I thought these people weren't interested in things like that. They don't make policies. They make no conclusions or anything. Here at the Villa d'Este on Lake Como in Italy, back in April 21st through the 23rd, 1961, was a meeting that was held in Italy. This would be the third no, the 13th meeting of the Bilderbergers. This, if you notice, these places, wherever they meet, are opulent to the extreme. My big question at this point, if this is just a simple organization of people coming together who supposedly are not making policies, they are not reaching final conclusions, who's funding this? Why would they fund a group of people, to put it nicely, are people who are just complaining about the ills and sorrows of this world, who can do nothing about it? If they can do nothing about it, why are they having these meetings, and why is it being funded? You see, these things just aren't adding up. Unless these people are actually doing something, it makes no sense to fund them just to, you know, go to these opulent places and regions of the world. Now, on April 23rd through the 25th, in 1971, the 17th meeting of the Bilderbergers would be held for the third time on American soil, and this would be at the Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont. Interesting enough, two of the things that they had discussed at this particular meeting was the contribution of business dealings with social instability and the change of America's role on the world. I remember back in the mid-70s, I lived in Germany for a number of years. It's an absolute gorgeous region of the world. And I remember this place in particular. This is Baden-Baden, Germany. And it was back, that would be June 6th through the 9th, that in 1991, that the Bilderberg meetings had commenced. This would be the 40th meeting, and what is most important is that one person in particular was also in attendance here, and that was Bill Clinton. You see, Bill Clinton, at this particular meeting, was given the thumbs up by the Bilderbergers and those members from the Council of Foreign Relations who reported back to their masters in the Illuminati. Bill Clinton was tapped at this point to become the next president of the United States, which is why he was in attendance at the Rio de Janeiro Conference on Biodiversity in 1992. Now, in the congressional records, it talks about the Bilderberg meetings and how basically, you know, they're just a group of idealists who are trying to help the world's economy, their policies, and other matters, such as their military might and other things. But what's interesting is that, again, they have those things in direct connections to the other groups. They're interested in the economy, the politics, and the religions of the other countries of the world that they're affecting. You will notice the interconnection between them is undeniable when we find out that there are members, once again, from the Council on Foreign Relations who meet regularly at these Bilderberg meetings. And again, notice the person who was there at the very beginning who owned and operated Jekyll Island, J.P. Morgan. And again, note, it was at the Baden-Baden, Germany meeting, it was President Clinton who was given the thumbs up at that meeting, who would later on go on to the meeting on the biodiversity treaty at Rio de Janeiro. You see, all these things are obviously interconnected. Again, all I'm trying to do at this point, ladies and gentlemen, is to show to you that all of them are interconnected and that they are all following the three-tiered things that make up the Illuminati: their money, their politics, and their religion. I think all these things are apparent once we take just even a cursory look at them. I don't want to sit back and give you folks, you know, a political science lesson for the next 3-4 hours. I mean, my goodness, you people would be bored to tears, and quite honest, I wouldn't want to watch it either. You know, I'd be bored to tears after 3-4 hours. No, all I'm trying to prove to you at this point is that everything so far is not only just aligning up with the Illuminati belief system, but it is also lining up specifically with the book of Revelation, in Revelations chapter 17 and 18. What we're going to do, we're just going to just wrap it up for now, and we'll be picking it up in the next section, which is called the Club of Rome. The next front organization that the Illuminati created to perpetuate their creation for a new world order is known as the Club of Rome. Now, it was back in 1968 that 36 European economists had met at Rome. One of them was Aurelio Pecci. Dr. Aurelio Pecci, along with Alexander King, got together and created, as I just stated, what is known as the Club of Rome. Now, 36 European economists met at Rome, and they decided that they would form a think tank. Now, they were convinced that the governments of the world as a whole was unable to solve their own problems, and that it would be necessary for economists and other intellectuals to solve the world problems which the governments of the world was incapable of doing. Or at least that was the cover story that was given for their creation. And here is one of the meetings of the Club of Rome going on, and what really, really bowls me over is the way it says, "Save our one earth, it's our world." I know Al Gore would love to be a tree-hugging person in this meeting. I mean, there it is. Let's, you know, make our world a viable living organ, and as the Biodiversity Treaty said, you know, they're going to make nature worship or witchcraft the new religion. And of course, concern over the earth as being a sentient being falls within, you know, that belief system. Now, the Club of Rome believes that only certain people can come together and solve the world's problems. This was supposed to have been done by the United Nations. Or at least wasn't that the idea behind the United Nations? You know, here we have another front organization of the Illuminati that was purposely created to act supposedly as a problem solver for the world. And when we get into the Club of Rome, you're going to find out that they haven't been doing their job either. According to the congressional records, and this one was entered March 20th, 1973, speaking on the Club of Rome, they are a group of world citizens sharing a common concern for the future of humanity and acting merely as a catalyst to stimulate public debate, to sponsor investigations and analysis of the problematic, and to bring these to the attention of decision makers. Now, it continues on to say, the Club of Rome is not a club devoted exclusively to problems of industrial societies attempting to find solutions of affluence, but a group concerned with the world system as a whole and with the disparities it includes. Now, this one you need to take special note of, and I'll prove to you why in just a second. The Club of Rome is not a group of futurologists, but of individuals who realize the necessity of attacking now longer-term and fundamental problems which are difficult to approach with our present methods of government and which could give rise to irreversible situations. The reason that the Club of Rome claimed not to be a group of futurologists is because 3 years ago before this time, in 1970, A project was started by this group which created dubious and disastrous results. And I'll explain to you what that was. This is Dennis L. Meadows, and over here we have Jay Forrester. Now these two men got together and they wrote a book that was called The Limits to Growth. It was published, I believe, back in 1972. Now, these men, of course, who were active members of the Club of Rome, when they wrote the book, The Limits to Growth, predicted all but doomsday for the earth. This book claimed that by the time 1981 would come about, the world would run out of gold. By 1985, the world would run out of mercury. In 1987, the world would run out of tin. 1990, we would have no more zinc. 1992, we would run literally out of petroleum now. So we wouldn't be able to run our cars or anything, blah, blah, blah. That would be, by the time that book was published, 20 years down the road. 1993, man would run out of copper, and by the time 2100 came about, humanity would probably be extinct. Now, remember, these are the things that was found in The Limits to Growth, and this was the result of what the Club of Rome had been espousing because of their great intellectual capacities. They were looking into the world's problems and what would happen. Now, when we think of what happened back in the early 70s, right around 1973, when the oil crisis had hit America, it was absolutely devastating. Supposedly, oil was going to be impossible to get because there was supposed to have been some type of shortage going on. I remember I had been driving. I had a license at that point for a little bit more than a year. And at that time, because of the so-called gas shortage, I could only buy $3 of gas at a gas station at any given time. People were acting like animals, literally fighting in these lines just to try to get ahead of each other, just so that they could get $3 worth of oil. And at the same time, Jimmy Carter was telling us that we were supposed to be bringing our thermostats down to, I believe it was 65 degrees. It was 65 or 68, something like that. But at 65 degrees, I couldn't help but wonder, gee, at the White House, was Jimmy Carter doing the same thing? You know, when he was inviting all these presidents and dignitaries throughout the world, was his house at 65 degrees at the White House? You know? The truth of the matter is, what was going on then was the Illuminati needed to make the Arab nations wealthy because they needed to use the resources there so that they could continuously fund and fill their coffers so that they could continue with other people's monies towards the creation of a new world order. You see, what was going on, Jimmy Carter had actually ordered all those oil tankers that was bringing oil over in that time and ordered them to stay out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Presidential orders were given, they were supposed to stay out there until he brought them in. Now, when I found out how much petroleum was in those tankers, and you know how much gas could be produced, and I compared how much was out there in comparison to how much gas we use in America on a daily basis on the average, the conclusion, when you just do the mathematics, this entire so-called oil crisis happened because we did not have 2 weeks worth of gas. That's how much petroleum was out in the Atlantic. There was approximately 2 weeks worth of gas out there, the petroleum, that we would normally use. And as it says, this is average figures. And supposedly this was the reason why we had the gas crunch. Now that's absolutely ridiculous. But that is what we were led to believe, because those oil tankers, supposedly we had nothing, but they were full of petroleum, which were ordered out there by President Carter himself. So this entire crunch happened because of a lie, and simply because the Illuminati needed to continuously fund their plans for the New World Order. See, they're not going to use their money if they can help it. They're going to use your money. This is why you people, to this very day, have received more taxes than you and I know what to do together. I mean, taxes alone in the United States bring in countless billions of dollars, and of course we don't see any of it, but and I can tell you right now, the government certainly isn't using it to benefit our lives. They're using it to perpetuate the plans for the Illuminati. Now, interesting enough, now remember, according to the Club of Rome and to the limits of growth, we were going to run out of gold, mercury, tin, zinc, petroleum, and copper between 1981 and 1993. And another one of the problems we were facing wasn't just, we had to keep our thermostats at 65 degrees, was that there was constant brownouts during the summer months because supposedly we were out of gas. Now, during this same time, towards the end of Carter's administration, we had the Iran hostage situation in which our own people were being held captive in Iran. In Carter's administration, among other things, from 1973 throughout 81, we were in a depression that was worse than the Great Depression of October 29th, 1929. Nothing was even close to what Carter had put us through under the auspices of the Illuminati. And as I just stated, because of the Iran hostage situation, America was looking like a very weak nation at the time. We couldn't go in and rescue our own people on the force of arms or anything. Everything we tried was a complete debacle. Now, it's interesting that when Ronald Reagan literally beat Carter in a sweeping vote. I mean, literally, he just, just swept Carter out of office. It was absolutely incredible. I remember when that had happened. The limits to growth, as you recall, claimed that by 1981 we'd be running out of certain resources, and by the time 1993 came about, in that 12-year period, we would run out of all those resources, and by 2100 humanity could be wiped out. But it's very interesting, when Ronald Reagan came into office, this is what happened. Oil prices, which was at $40 a barrel in the 70s, fell down to $15 a barrel in 1981, which really comes out to be about $7 a barrel when you adjust it for inflation. Agricultural products fell in price in 1981, and when you adjust it for inflation, that was a 50 to 70% drop. Gas reserves. Now remember, we were in some type of gas crisis. We had none. We didn't know where to find any, and all this blah, blah, blah. During Carter's administration, and according to the limits to growth, we only had 1,500 trillion cubic feet of gas left. However, Reagan steps into the office, and all of a sudden we found out that we actually have gas reserves that was higher than 4,000 trillion cubic feet. All those precious metals that we were supposed to be running out, copper doubled, silver reserves climbed up to 60%, and gold reserves climbed up to 50%. So not only was the report, the limits to growth, looked like a joke, but remember, the congressional records clearly warned us that they are not a group of futurologists, and considering, what they predicted and that it never happened, they never should be futurologists. But look at what happened to all the damage that the Illuminati was causing through Carter in his administration. Everything reversed itself. Things got better and brighter than we've ever had in I don't know how long. And the reason why was because Ronald Reagan was a professed born-again Christian. He made no bones about it. He himself said he was a born-again Christian. And it was a Christian president that once again brought God back into the White House. And it's because of this, I'm convinced, God's blessing was once again able to be put on America and her peoples, because we had once again a Christian leader. When you have a Christian leader with a true, sold-out, dedicated heart for God's people, for America, or for anyone, God can open up His floodgates of blessings and pour them out. It's only when you have poor leadership, or people who claim to be born-again Christians who really aren't, or for whatever reason, when you have that type of poor leadership, you can't receive any blessings from God at all. You literally are left to your own devices. And experience has shown me, by watching others, that when you try to do your own thing without the blessings of God, you're doomed to failure. Now, back in 1941, there was a post-World War II map of the New World Order. This map divides the earth into 9 regions, or 9 kingdoms. Now, this map was drawn back, as I said, in 1941. This was 4 years before the conclusion of World War II. And if you take a good look and just look at the regions of the world and the color comparisons, you can see, yes, it was 9 kingdoms. However, according to Revelation 13:1, and you read it all the way through verse 18, the earth is supposed to be divided into 10 kingdoms. Not 9, but 10. And it's interesting enough that during the mid-70s, the Club of Rome had indeed divided the world into 10 kingdoms. It was predicted and prophesied in Revelation 13, verse 1 all the way through 18, that this is exactly what would happen to the world, that it would end up with 10 kingdoms. And if we go by what the Club of Rome states, this is how they divided the world into their 10 kingdoms. Of course, starting in Kingdom 1 would be North America and Canada. And if you just go all the way down, you will find how all the nations of the world was divided into 10 kingdoms by the Club of Rome. Now, interesting enough, the Club of Rome claims that they have certain problems against the earth. One of those problems was, the greenhouse effect and how the ozone layer was depleting. And then, of course, there was the demography of the earth. There was a population explosion that was affecting the environment, employment, health, food, and water, so on and so forth. Then, of course, there was, certain countries that was trying to develop beyond their capacity to be able to produce. Then there was, of course, different countries held different value system. I mean, if you were to compare our belief system to that of those extreme Muslims, I mean, my goodness, folks. I mean, yes, there is a difference between our value system, but I think mine, which is based on the Bible, and they do believe, and they do base theirs on the Quran, I happen to believe that and I hate to put it like this because it does sound like I'm just being biased, but I have a feeling the Bible is a lot, it is definitely more accurate than the Quran will ever be. You know, then there was governance, how the global governance is really just another term for the New World Order. That's all it is. So when they're talking about global governance, they're just speaking of, you know, the New World Order. Then, of course, the other problems that they claim they have against us and the rest of the world, work in the future, the information society, new technologies, education, the global society, and world economic and financial orders. Now, you see, ladies and gentlemen, again, what we have here is the exact same complaints that the other organizations of the Illuminati have. This group of so-called intellectuals, this think tank, just like the others, think that they can come up with the solutions of the world because we're not able to govern ourselves, and those people who we put in office just can't solve our own problems. Well, it's not that those people we put in office can't solve our problems, it's just that they're not allowed to. There's just too many political puppets, too much power that the Illuminati is wielding that virtually there's almost nothing we can do about it at this point. However, we are not at the last straw yet. I am absolutely convinced that through education and with God backing us, which as Christians we should always strive for, we can stop them from going ahead as fast forward as they want to, and that we can still save many people to the kingdom of heaven before it's too late. What it comes down to, as always, is what are you willing to do about it? The sixth and last frontman of the Order of the Illuminati that we must look at is the Trilateral Commission. Now, when we speak of the Trilateral Commission, the one person we need to take an immediate look at is the big new Brzezinski. He was the 10th United States National Security Advisor from 1977 to 1981. Now, Brzezinski himself was a Polish intellectual who taught at Columbia University. Now, it was during this time, I believe it was 1970, he wrote the book Between Two Ages. He claimed that an alliance between North America, Western Europe, and Japan needed to be done. He believed that global changes could only come about if he did this. Now, Brzezinski himself was an ardent follower. I swear he was a #1 fan of none other than Karl Marx himself. And I don't think I have to get into the teachings of Karl Marx here, you know, but nevertheless, Brzezinski himself idolized this man. And while he was teaching at Columbia, he also called for America to protect international private businessmen. He believed that international money barons should be brought together and banded so that they could protect their own interests and secure their own political positions. Now, in the cornerstone, I should say, in Foreign Relations, which is the, if you remember, one of the magazines that is put out by the Council on Foreign Relations, David Rockefeller had read an article in it, in the Foreign Relations magazine about Between Two Ages, that book which Brzezinski had written. Now remember, Brzezinski himself, in his own book, Between Two Ages, stated that a bolder approach was needed, you know, if they were going to, you know, create the world to be one giant community and all this. And among other things, he laid out all his concerns about humanity and how he also called for the United States, Western Europe, and Japan to come together and, you know, form some type of giant global community. Now, as I said before, Rockefeller had read this book. He was so impressed by this book that at the 1972 meeting of the Bilderberg's group, which was in Knox, Belgium, right here, he invited Brzezinski to this meeting. Afterwards, Brzezinski himself was invited by David Rockefeller to one of his mansions. Now that would have been the Pocantico Hills mansion that he has in New York. Yes, this would be Pocantico Hills. This is where he had a meeting, a private meeting with Zbigniew Brzezinski, and this would have been back in, I believe it was 72, 72, right around there. And he had spoke in length with Brzezinski. And Rockefeller was so impressed, not just by the book, but by Brzezinski himself. He pushed the Bilderbergers and those other groups who he had influence under to create this giant organization that Brzezinski had been longing for and had written about in his book, Between New Ages. Now, this organization you would now recognize as the Trilateral Commission. Now, Brzezinski himself was elected as the first Secretary General of the Trilateral Commission. Now, what is interesting about all this is that Jimmy Carter, who wasn't president yet at this point, well, I should say, who would become president, during 1971, had been invited to Rockefeller's mansion on a number of occasions. He met with not just with Rockefeller, but also Brzezinski. Brzezinski was in attendance at these meetings, and they literally, after speaking to Carter, gave him the thumbs up. You know, we are going to make sure you become the next president of the United States. Now, Jimmy Carter was a lame horse at that point, as I saw it. I mean, when you look at all the national figures and what was going on back then, when Carter was actually going to try to run for the president, he only had 4% of his own party's votes. And yet, miraculously, his own party somehow allowed him to run for the president. I don't see how that's possible, unless, of course, you know how the order of the Illuminati works, because you can't run under your party's ticket, you know, with only 4%. Carter himself, literally, he was an unknown political figure. I mean, this guy was so unknown that at the time, he was the governor of Georgia during 1970-71, and he was asked to appear on a television program. It was called What's My Line? Now, What's My Line was based on, there would be a moderator and four panelists. The guests would come out and sit, you know, next to the moderator, and those four other people, the panelists, would ask a series of questions. They could ask a total of 20 questions, and these questions could only get a yes or no response, as far as I understand. At the end of those questions, no one could figure out who this guy was, and no one even recognized him. This is how politically unknown Jimmy Carter was. I mean, he was a peanut farmer who was the governor of Georgia, and that was it. But the powers that be wanted Carter to be the president, and they made sure he did it. Just like Wilson had Colonel Mandel House grooming him and telling him what to do, Jimmy Carter had Zbigniew Brzezinski telling him what to do. Remember, Brzezinski did become his national security advisor. Now, what's interesting enough is that here we have at one of the Trilateral Commission meetings, dead center, is Pope John Paul II. For those of you who say, well, you know, the Pope never gets involved in anything political or anything like that, I mean, give me a break. Even this photo shows that the Pope is involved in these matters. This photo is where he met with the Trilateral Commission. Now, Carter had written a book, and it's really quite a hoot when I think about it, because the book was entitled, "I'll Never Lie to You." Okay, yeah, we believe that one, but, you know, in it, you know, Carter said that he was tired of insiders running the country. You know, and he pointed to the insiders as the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers. Now, excuse me, this was just a ruse, because he filled his cabinet with people from the Trilateral Commission instead. So you see, for us, this was a lose-lose situation, and for him and those powers that be, it was a win-win situation. That's exactly what had happened. Now, Carter's promise, when he was on the campaign trail, excuse me, for the second term, he said, among other things, he would not give the Panama Canal away, partially or in whole. He would never, never do it. And remember, according to his book, he said he'd never lie, you know. Now, Panama Canal, when you look at it, it doesn't look like much on a global map. And if we look at this map right here, we find that the Panama Canal is nothing more than just a little blip here. It's in between, you know, North America and South America. But this is such a vital point of importance. It was extremely, extremely important, because in the early 1900s, in order to prevent ships from having to go all the way around South America, you know, one way or the other to get to where they needed to go, literally what they did, they cut to the very core, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, a corridor. Through here, we had the natural waterways there, then they cut through here. And it's through the, an incredible engineering feat back in the early 1900s that the Panama Canal had come about. Now remember, at this point, the Panama Canal had existed for about 60-something years. And Carter wrote that book, "I'll Never Lie to You," and on the campaign trail he swore he would never give the Panama Canal away in whole or in part. And yet, he handed over to Omar Torrijos, who was known to be a Marxist and who was running a Marxist government, the Panama Canal. And this would be Torrijos himself. He just handed it right over without a problem. Why? Because his masters in the order of the Illuminati told him that's what he was going to do. And the Panama Canal, I'll tell you right now, that area is positively gorgeous. I mean, you can see one of these huge freighters running through it, and how successful the engineers were at creating the Panama Canal. And yet, it is no longer in our control. It went over to a Marxist regime. Now, in his book, with no apologies, Senator Barry Goldwater, when he was speaking on the Trilateral Commission, said the following. He called the Trilateral Commission David Rockefeller's new international cabal. He also went on to say that it is intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidations of the commercial and banking interests by seizing control of the political government of the United States. Now, keeping that in mind, here's a quote from the New Freedom magazine, and this is dated 1913. And this is a quote, surprisingly enough, from Woodrow Wilson. Listen to what he had to say, and keep this in mind with what Barry Goldwater just said. He says, "Since I have entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breaths when they speak in condemnation of it." Here's what Senator Barry Goldwater further said about the Trilateral Commission. And as you recall, the one thing that connects the Trilateral Commission and proves that they are a part of the organization of the Illuminati is that they hold to the same political, financial, and religious beliefs of the Illuminati. Now listen to this. "In my view," and this is Senator Barry Goldwater now, "in my view, the Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. All this is to be done in the interest of creating a more peaceful, more productive world community. What the Trilateralists truly intend is the creation of a worldwide economic power superior to the political governments of the nation-states involved. They believe the abundant materialism they propose to create will overwhelm existing differences. As managers and creators of the system, they will rule the future." And it's interesting. That reminds me, back in 1838, when Maya Amschel Rothschild made one of the most profoundest statements I've ever heard. He said, "Allow me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who writes its laws." And he's correct. In the Illuminati, that's known as their version of the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So you see, the Trilateral Commission, there's a lot more to it than just what meets the eye, than what people are going to try to tell you. You know, it's just, a group of concerned people, just another one of them, No. They are interconnected once again by the membership. Let me show you this here, ladies and gentlemen, and let's take a good look at it. Every person listed here, starting at the top, would be David Rockefeller. He's not just a member of the Trilateral Commission, he's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Then there's Donna Shalala, who was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. She was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and also a member of the Trilateral Commission. It goes down, to J.D. Rockefeller IV, who was United States Congress Republican. He was also in the Council of Foreign Relations, and at the same time, a member of the Trilateral Commission. And it just goes on and on and on. Again, this organization is interconnected with another front organization of the Illuminati. Now, if you remember, we took a good look at the logo of the United Nations and found out it was nothing but an occultic one. Well, let's take a look at the logo of the Trilateral Commission. Now, we can see here is what the logo is supposed to like, okay? But again, this is just, something you're just supposed to see and not understand. But when we break it down, first of all, over here, if you look very carefully, we have a top perspective of what the capstone of the Illuminati on the dollar bill will look like in 3D. That's all this is the same capstone of the Illuminati. Over here, if any of you know what a Mobius strip is, it's a theoretical loop that goes on in an infinite looping pattern. There is no beginning and no end. This is why the capstone is there. This shows the infinite power of their god, Lucifer. And as I said before, you will find this on top of the great, on the pyramid, on the two great seals of the United States, which we have already proven are the two great seals of the Order of the Illuminati, and that's on a previous DVD in this tape series, which we've already done. Now, when we take a look at the whole of the symbol of the Trilateral Commission, their official seal now, you're going to find something very interesting. Comparing the top figure with the bottom figure, you will notice how they intertwine, and they actually form 3 sixes. Just compare the top to the bottom and just follow the curve and how it comes around, and each single one of these curves will form into a 6, a 6, and a 6. Now let's just look at this one more time, but in a much, in a much bigger format. This way it's a lot easier for you to see. You will note that according to Revelation 13, we know that there's going to be 3 identifying forms to the Antichrist. He will have, this identification will be through his name, his mark, or his number. Interesting enough how when we look at this for what it is, it really is, it's nothing but 3 sixes. Now, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, what I've been trying to do, as I stated from the beginning, I didn't want to try to bore you with 3 hours or 4 hours of giving you social study lessons or political science lessons. What my goal was to try to show to you not just excuse me, the 6 front organizations of the Illuminati, but I want to demonstrate to you how they're interconnected through their membership and through what they practice, you know, what they believe in, and that is their politics, their religion, and their view on money or the economy. Revelation 17 and 18 explains to us in detail how there is going to be a one world dictator who will come around with a one world religion and force us to bow down and worship him. We know this is predicted in the book of Revelation, and right now, as far as I see it, we are seeing the birth pains of this coming about. I'm convinced we are looking at the pre-signs for all these events to happen. All I can say at this point, ladies and gentlemen, is I pray that you will look into each of these organizations for yourselves. Look into the finer detail if you want to look at examples as far as, you know, what they've done politically speaking, what they've done to the world economies, so on and so forth. But remember one thing, when you do that, keep those things in mind with what the Bible prophesies, because this way at least you're not going to be shocked about what you will uncover. All I can say at this point, ladies and gentlemen, is I pray this DVD has been helpful to you, and I pray that the ones that will follow will be beneficial not just to you, but to everyone else you come across. And I genuinely pray, ladies and gentlemen, that you will find peace along the way, because this stuff can be very, very unnerving. So until the next DVD, God be with you, and may God keep you and your families.